Okay, hi. We have been hearing lots of stories all over the internet about soul bread. And so I thought that we would try making some soul bread Kristie style. Now you guys know I'm a huge fan of oat fiber, and I've made the soul bread exactly as the recipe is, and it's okay. The texture's a bit odd to me. We can talk about that as we go. But I decided that I would modify the soul bread recipe with oat fiber. Now we're gonna see how this goes. I may be making a huge mistake, but oat fiber just gives such a wonderful texture and that floury mouthfeel, so I couldn't help but want to experiment with it. Let's get started, and I'll tell you about my changes as we go. I have 12 ounces, just like the original recipe. I have 12 ounces of cream cheese. I did soften it in the microwave. To those 12 ounces of cream cheese, I'm going to add 4 eggs. Whoops. These are just 4 plain old eggs. And I don't know, they're pastured eggs. I don't know if there's shell in there or not. I had one of my helpers helping, and there may be some crunch in our soul bread. That's what you get. You can't get good help, especially when you pay them nothing. Yeah, there's a little bit of shell in there. Okay, we got it out now. So 12 ounces of softened cream cheese and 4 eggs. You just never know what's going to happen around here, right? To that, I'm going to add 2 ounces of melted butter, and that's part of the original recipe. But we're going to deviate once more from the original, and I'm going to add, instead of olive oil, it called for a 1/4 cup of olive oil, I'm going to use a 1/4 cup of bacon fat. And so it's just melted bacon fat. I keep a big glass jar, actually 2, by the stove so that I can use them. And I decided that instead of olive oil, I wanted to use bacon fat. And I'm going to also add the heavy cream. It's a 1/4 cup of heavy cream. So the only thing I've changed from the original recipe so far is using bacon fat instead of the olive oil. If you've made soul bread, it really is a great option for low carb. When I made it, my daughter had used it, sliced up very nicely, and my daughter used it to make grilled sandwiches. And in fact, I made a great grilled sandwich with pepperoni, cheese, and some jalapeno in it. It's really tasty one afternoon. I'm also going to add, and this is a change from the recipe, I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar. I just think it makes it rise a little bit better when you add the dry ingredients. I'm going to blend that in. Okay, and set this aside. That's all you do. Let that go. All right, now let's work with our dry ingredients. And this is where the recipe can get a little bit intimidating for some folks. Let me set this stuff aside because I really don't think I need it anymore. I'm going to save that in case I do. Okay. Oh, and sometimes the recipe does call for 4 drops of liquid sweetener, and so I will add that at the very end, and I don't know that I'll add 4. Okay, so let's mix our dry ingredients. This is where I'm making some of the changes. Instead of 1 2/3 cup of whey protein isolate, I'm using 1 1/4 cup. So that's 1 1/4 cup of whey protein isolate. Now, the whey protein isolate, I put it away. I'm using the Isopure. Apparently, it does matter what brand you use, and different brands behave differently. Okay, so I used 1 1/4 cups of that. I'm also using 1/2 cup of oat fiber, 1/2 cup. And let me just tell you guys, if I'm ever saying something and you're questioning it, go with what's in the written recipe versus what I say, because sometimes I say tablespoon when I mean teaspoon. I just say crazy stuff. So always check the written recipe so that I have a chance to correct it. Okay, so I'm just mixing that together, and the oat fiber is quite powdery. Salt, this is a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. I'm also going to use, I'm going to throw this in. This is not in the original. This is a packet of yeast. Now, nothing's warm enough to really activate it. I'm doing it more for taste than for rise. Again, that's a deviation from the original. I'm also going to go back to the original and use, this is baking soda. It's a 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda. I'm mixing it right in there. Now, one part of the recipe says to sprinkle the xanthan gum over the wet ingredients. I'm not doing that either. Such a rebel. I'm taking the xanthan gum, and I believe it's a teaspoon of xanthan gum. I'll have to, again, check the ingredients list. And I'm just going to sprinkle that into my dry ingredients. As long as you mix it well in your dry ingredients, you don't have to worry about it clumping up. And then this is baking powder, and it is 2½ teaspoons of baking powder. Same thing. I'm just going to mix that up. Now, there are all kinds of versions of soul bread out there, sweet and savory. And I really, since I was using the bacon fat, I really would love to add cheddar cheese and bacon or jalapenos to this. But for the purposes of today, we're going to keep it plain. We may come back and get fancy if this works out okay. Now, here's the part that can be intimidating. Don't let it be. Let me scrape this off. Basically, what you want to do is sift the ingredients over. You don't want to over stir. When you over mix, you run the risk of overworking the dough, and then it's going to be super, it's going to deflate. It won't rise as much. So the original recipe is to sift in your flours. Well, I'm not using a sifter, I have one, but I'm just using a colander or a sieve, whichever one you want to call this. And look, I'm just doing this. And basically that ensures there are no clumps. I'm just shaking over. This is so easy. My daughter, actually, the first time we made this, she did this part. So you know, if my 12-year-old can do this, you guys can do this. I wish she was here to help me. She's gone out of town for the weekend. And that just, you know, I miss her. Mama likes having all the birds in the nest, right? I am wearing my new apron that was given to me for Christmas. I couldn't help but tell you guys about it. My mother gave me the apron, and my sister-in-law had it monogrammed, or my future sister-in-law, Cooking Keto with Kristie. So I was excited to wear it. I figured soul bread was as good a time as any to sport it. Now you saw me sift that in, and I'm gonna stir it with a pretty light hand. And that's it. I don't want to overmix, and you can see I'm just going around the edges, cutting through the center, and that's all I'm doing. The baking soda and vinegar should be reacting. Remember, vinegar is not part of the original recipe. That is something that I do that seems to work well when I make soul bread. You don't have to do that. Okay. All right, that's mixing in pretty well. So let me explain what I'm going to do. I have 2 pans, and the recipe calls for putting nearly all of it in a pan this size. I'm going to put most of it in this size, and then I have this. We are going to modify. We're going to have a little cinnamon, a little brown sugar, a little vanilla, and we are going to do a small sweet one because I couldn't stand just to make it plain. And I'm also going to add a few drops of the liquid sucralose. Now, this is not blended perfectly. Don't worry about that. Again, you overmix it, you're not going to have that nice fluffy rise that you want from the bread. People will say, well, I made it, but mine wasn't fluffy. That may be why you may have overstirred. Okay, let's put this in here. I also will tell you my oven is preheating. It's already at 325, which is again part of the original recipe. And this is not something, it is a very wet dough. This is not something that you could make biscuits or rolls with, I don't think. You could put the dough in a muffin top pan. I'm gonna stop there with it, I think. You could put it in a muffin top pan and probably make rolls with it. I have not tried that. I'm sure somebody has, since this is such a popular recipe. Okay, I didn't try it. It tastes about like it did. I will tell you, the bacon fat adds a really nice flavor to it. I'm gonna hand that off to my husband, who can put that in the oven. And I'll finish licking my finger. Okay, now, even with the bacon fat, we're going to take a risk here. I'm going to add cinnamon and brown sugar and a little bit of vanilla because you know I love vanilla. I don't have any measuring spoons with me. I didn't think about that. So you're going to have to trust me when I tell you that that is a half of a teaspoon of vanilla. You're also going to have to trust me when I tell you that I'm using about a 1/4 cup of brown sugar, and I didn't open that very well. And I'm going to use my spatula to do that. And that is about a 1/4 cup right there. Actually, I'm going to add a little more. So that's probably more like a 1/3 of a cup. And then I'm going to add the cinnamon. And I don't want to do too much, maybe a 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon. Let's see, yeah, that's about a teaspoon, 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon. Let's see what we have there, and I'll adjust after we give it a taste. I love cinnamon bread, and had I tried this before, I probably would add pecans and may sprinkle some pecans and cinnamon over the top. Same kind of thing. Even though I'm adding this, I don't want to overmix it, because if I do, I'll just have a flat mess. Okay, let's give it a taste. Oh, y'all are gonna like this. I'll have to change it up a little bit for a full loaf, but we know it's possible. I'm gonna put a few drops of liquid in here too. Yum. And this is, these pans, both pans have been heavily greased with coconut oil. Remember, I use the refined coconut oil so that my family doesn't complain about the taste. The original loaf is supposed to go for about 45 minutes. Since I've used less, I'm going to keep an eye on it. But if you're doing it at home and making the loaf the way it's supposed to be, follow the original recipe. And I'm using the original recipe from Low Carb Yum for Soul's bread. Okay, I'm going to put this like that. And I'm going to spread it out just a little bit. This bread tends to stay the way it is when you put it in the oven. So let me do this, and then we're going to do something special. Hold on. Lick my finger again. Okay. Let's sprinkle a little extra cinnamon over the top. Can't wait for my family to try this. My daughter will come in, and I've cooked all kinds of things this weekend, and she's going to come in, and she's going to be happy she came home, I hope. Okay. And then I'm going to do a little, and I know there's cinnamon on that, I'm going to sprinkle brown sugar over the top. How can you go wrong with sprinkling brown sugar? And this is the Sucre Brown that you've seen me use so many times. I love this stuff, and I'll put the link for where to order that and give you a discount code if you want to order it. Okay, that's going off into the oven. I'll see you in just a bit, and we'll see how our soul bread turned out. Soul bread is ready, and I had some problems getting it out of the pan. Now, I don't know why, because when I've made it before, I've oiled the pan really, really well, and it's just slid out. I did use different pans, so maybe that was it. But anyway, we'll slice it up, but I did have a hard time getting it out of the oven. The soul bread tends to be a little dry in consistency. That's why I think we like it so much grilled. It usually rises a lot more, but remember, I just did a partial loaf, but since I made 2. And you can see it did rise, and if you can see kind of the nooks and crannies in there, the texture does seem a little different since I used the oat fiber, and so I'm really anxious to see what that's like. I'm going to put some butter on this, a little bit of butter on this. And like I said, this stores well in the fridge. You can see I've sliced it just with a bread knife, but it's really easy to slice up and to put in the fridge. So gosh, this looks really good. And I'm not eating the heel, I'm eating the inner slice. It's much better flavor with the oat fiber. Holy cow, this could pass, I think, for real bread. When I made it without oat fiber, I actually said, my comment was it was a little bit like styrofoam. almost a tough texture. This really has a bread-like taste. Let me hand this off so that my husband can try it. I really like that. And I think you could easily get, yeah, I'm getting a heads up from him. I can't wait for my daughter to try this when she's home. I think you can easily get, even with it being smaller, it's really super easy to get 16 to 20 slices out of this. And again, this is, you can see the nooks and crannies, and it's hot. You can see the nooks and crannies, so it rose really well for me. It has a nice crust on it. Really very good. I like it much better than the original recipe, but I like the oat fiber. Let's try this. This is so pretty. It really sliced up gorgeous. I had a little bit of problem with one part of it sticking to the pan, but you can see the texture still is really good. Be careful and bake this as long as it says in the original recipe. This was close to an hour, it's about 45 minutes. This one was actually close to 30 minutes or so. Great texture. I'm gonna put a little butter on this. I've got somebody really anxious to try this sweet bread. So let me put, get the butter. Gosh, this butter hasn't been out of the fridge long enough. I'm having a hard time with things coming out of containers today. I'm sorry, the butter does not want to stay on there. I'm surprised the dogs are not at my feet jumping on me by now too. All right, I'm gonna hand this slice off to be tried. And then there's this slice, and gosh, it smells really good. It smells like a cold day at Grandma's where she's making you cinnamon toast. So good? I'm getting a thumbs up. That's really tasty. I've got a little butter on it, probably more than I normally would put, but the cinnamon in it is just perfect. I think that I will try, I'll do another video, a full loaf where I will sprinkle cinnamon pecans in the middle of the batter and then on top, but this is fantastic. Definitely a treat for school morning. I can see like putting this on a pan and put it in the oven, sprinkling cinnamon sugar, and it would taste a lot like what my grandmother used to make when we were growing up. So, this is the adapted soul bread recipe. It's adapted to have oat fiber in it, a little less protein, a little more fiber, and this one was adapted to have cinnamon and sugar. So the recipes, as always, will be in the written video description. I hope that you enjoy them with your family.